on all things PLG, the new three-letter acronym that has taken the world by storm, much in the way that account-based marketing did a few cycles ago. So we're going to talk through that with our esteemed guest, Jen Igartua. So I think I butchered your last name after you told me. Igartua.
Igartua, you nailed it.
There we go. I just needed a second chance. So I appreciate you giving me a second chance there. So welcome, everybody. Great to see you all this beautiful Thursday morning, unless you're in the Bay Area where it is gloomy as usual. We are in the perma winter of our lives. So I am Matt Amundsen. I am an executive in residence here at Scale Venture Partners, who is putting on this webinar for us. So thank you very much to the team at Scale. As an EIR here, I work on the Scale platform team, and let me just introduce a little bit about that to you before we cut to the meat of this presentation. So Jen, if you wouldn't mind advancing the slide.
You got it. Give me one sec. I'm having a little bit of Zoom is being a little bit silly for me.
Okay, fair enough. Apparently,
okay, we're in.
Brooklyn is having a bit of a challenge with Wi-Fi today. So the goal of the Scale platform team is we're helping our portfolio companies, and for anybody else who's joined today's webinar, as this is a public webinar, build and optimize hypergrowth go-to-market machines. And obviously PLG has become an increasingly popular method of go-to-market, and it is one where, in my opinion, there's not a ton of thought leadership. So we're going to go through a lot of that today. If you could advance to the next slide, Jen. So just so you're aware of the Scale go-to-market platform team, so we leverage an expert network to provide a whole host of offerings to you. To our portfolio companies, we provide advisory. So that generally manifests as a weekly meeting and just to help guide our portfolio companies through any projects or problems that they may be dealing with at any given time. Content, we provide a whole host of services for things like how to build a sales deck, how to create awesome messaging, how to build an SDR team, how to build a marketing team. So we do a lot of that, and then educational and networking events. And today is really kind of a little bit of 2 and 3, which is hopefully we're creating some education for you folks and a little bit of networking and some really killer content. Now, I have seen this deck and it is fantastic. So I am super, super excited to introduce you all to, and if you don't know, Jen and the team at GoNimbly, she is the CEO. Jen and I worked together for a period of time while I worked for a brand called Everstring, where she helped us immensely put together our go-to-market motion. That was a company that ended up being acquired by ZoomInfo, and so it was great for me personally, and great for our investors, and great for ZoomInfo. So thank you all so much for joining us, and I am going to turn it over to Jen. Jen, take it away.
Well, thank you. Sorry about all the deck issues. My computer's going a little slow. If it's terrible, let me know. We'll pause and redo it. But hopefully it's a lot of me talking, so the slides are pretty simple. So first, I'm Jen. That's me in the picture, the CEO of GoNimbly. I'm here to talk to you about all things PQL, PQA, PLG, MQL, MQA, WTF, LMNOP, and then I will STFU. I'm proud to share all the knowledge that I've gained working with truly the most incredible SaaS companies, probably ones that you all look up to. I'll brag about those in a minute. In the time that I've been kind of working with GoNimbly, we focus in 2 areas, in SaaS and also within PLG, and really the operations behind it. We're calling it RevOps or go-to-market ops. And then I layer that also with a passion about how the work gets done. I think that there's not just the work itself, but how teams organize and how teams get work done, and what that relationship with work is. And I have an improv background, so I bring a lot of that into work. I think that work can feel like play. And on the side, little side hustle I also make board games. So I also think I've got an interesting perspective of having a company that sells like a cheap game B2C. And then I also help operate B2B companies. And it's just how different we see the customer, how different we think about the customer experience. I'm excited because I believe in sharing knowledge. I think it's important. And also, if you ask any questions I don't know, I'm also very open about what I don't know. So I will be very honest about, that knowledge I'm referencing.
And Jen, before we keep rolling
Yeah.
here, I'm actually going to switch and share the presentation
Okay,
because
thank
yours is
you.
reading a little bit blurry, and I want
Appreciate
to give
you.
you the opportunity to do your thing. So
That will be very helpful.
second, and let's get up to speed. Okay, there we go.
Thank you. Cool. All right, so this is the slide I get to brag about, all those customers that I referenced. But the interesting thing about all the companies that we work with is I pulled out all the ones that have essentially a PLG motion. And Twilio was actually the first customer that we had, Zendesk the second. I am indebted to them because they allowed me to build a business. But when we started doing their work, we didn't call it PLG. For Twilio, we call it developer first. So all of the motions we were talking about was how do we get developers to use the platform? How do we get them to that $5 threshold? If you've heard about one of Twilio's biggest customer, Uber, was spending a ton of money before they ever even spoke to them. So that was what we were learning with our work with Twilio. On the other hand, and this is about 10 years ago with Zendesk, we talked about free trial flows. So we were very focused on that free trial experience and how do we get free trial to convert. And never did we talk about, product-led growth, not until very recently. I say all this because we have frameworks, right? We've seen this work before. What PLG can feel like is like a new hype, but it's been embedded in the workflows of these, companies that you see here for a long time. And it's been really fun to work with those companies, but Clockwise is a new customer and we're working with like the virality of a product that really needs to come into kind of like Slack, come into an organization, blow up. Coursera was really fun because during COVID, they had a huge, influx of users all of a sudden, but not the technical infrastructure to manage that. So we worked on that. So, this is a little bit of social proof of the work that we've done, but we've learned something very different. If you look at all these logos, their version of PLG is completely different. What they worry about, what they focus on is you can learn vastly from each of them.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because you look at across a number of these brands and you say, okay, well, there's a couple here where the buying process is low, is there's low friction, whether they have a free product and it's based upon usage, and there's others that you say, wow, that's an enterprise company. How in the heck can they have a PLG motion? So that I find to be very interesting. Typically you see, it's free, and then there's, up to some kind of threshold, and then crossover either a usage or consumption a threshold that drives them into paid. But here, I think, some of these, wow, that's really incredible.
Totally. And if you think about, one of the problems that Twilio had, for example, is you get a lot of developers who don't want to talk to sales, who use their Gmail address, who are testing a product out, and you can't, a lot of times you get the idea of, well, exclude all Gmail. Well, those are all the people that are starting to spend a bunch of money and are huge leads. How do you deal with that? So each of them have their own different issues that they're going to go against.
Sure.
So on the next slide, I just wanted to kind of pull back and talk a little bit of tell you all a little story. So I started my career in marketing automation at a company called Blue Wolf that was acquired by IBM. And this was right around the time when marketing automation was hot, right? We were just getting into nurture campaigns. We were just getting into lead scoring. That was the hot thing. And the theory of it was really beautiful, right? It's the cutting edge idea was, why don't we no longer call every lead? Why don't we no longer just do cold outbound? Why don't we nurture and wait for the right time when the customer wants to talk to us? Do that. It will increase conversion. That was the big idea. On the next slide, this is probably a visual that you all recognize. And I screenshotted this from like case studies, and I kept the name of the company on the left because it's the one I worked on. And so on the left one, it's 2002. The right one was like a re-architected Mound Waterfall in 2012. Maybe these bring you joy, but I think for a lot of us, they bring a little bit of an eye roll and like maybe some trauma from having to try to implement this structure. But GE was one of my first customers. And every business unit, its own silo, we implemented the demand waterfall 10 times for 10 different business units. What was the lead scoring? How will we hand off? We looked at what are all the things that would tell us that somebody's ready, from the webinars they attended to the events to they visited a pricing page, all that kind of stuff. And then we got the pressure, and this is not just GE, every company I've worked with, it happened at Everstring, Matt. So you were part of this, where all of a sudden it became, well, I've got SDRs who need 100 leads a week, so we need more. And what we did on the next slide is we started to game the system. So instead of wanting to find when the customer was ready for the conversation, we went from 100 score down to 90, from 90 down to 89, and we just kept decreasing. So because we needed to feed our team. And I think that's the thing that's the takeaway for me is we're likely to do this again in PLG. We're going to cannibalize this theory that we have, which is allow someone to get to this aha moment, and then we'll expand. We're going to start calling every free trial, every single sign up, if we're not really cognizant of the fact that this is a very real pressure of feeding our internal team instead of talking to our customer when they need it.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's something that I've experienced both at a previous employer where there was somewhat of a PLG motion, and of course, during my times at places like Marketo and at Everstring, where it was like, hey, like we need to feed the beast here. We have this beast that's hungry and it wants to make phone calls and it wants to book meetings and whatnot. And so oftentimes the SDR becomes the Band-Aid for, oh, well, we don't really like our sign-up experience, or we're having trouble driving leads to an aha moment, and so we want to insert them, or in a sort of traditional Serious Decisions waterfall. They've downloaded this piece of content, but they haven't bit and signed up for this webinar, for this product demonstration or whatnot. So we'll insert an SDR here in order to sort of coerce that person forward. When the reality is, especially for very specific audiences, they just don't want to talk to anybody. They don't want to be bothered by anybody. In fact, what you see pretty frequently in a lot of PLG motions is people will sign up for a product and then immediately unsubscribe from their mailing list, right? Because they don't want the nudge emails. They don't want a sales call. They don't want an SDR prospecting into them.
Yep. Yeah, and I think you have to find the right balance, right? Because but we're going to get to this, which is we're not suggesting that we don't want a human experience, right? We know that we need it. We know that it's most SaaS companies at a certain threshold will have that SDR team, AE team, or that CS team. But I think if you go to the next slide, Matt, there's the idea or the walkaway that we want everyone to think about is, what if you could have a customer obsessed lens? We all know we want to get closer to the customer. It's very hard. Right? Most companies are not nailing this. But what if instead of protecting an individual team or protecting one specific funnel, one specific motion or a volume, instead we're actually thinking about when our customers need a human-led experience. And you could take this concept about anything. I'm just like, I'm hyper focusing on, great, we have product signups, we have users. When do we know that we have a salesperson or a person reach out, and what should they do about it? And I think that that's a place like you're talking about, is if our team's not busy, we're just going to tell them to call sooner. We're going to tell them to do more calls and more outbound. And if we get our forecast wrong and we hire 10 extra people, we're just going to cannibalize on that experience. And our users are not going to get an aha moment. And you're not going to get any of the benefits that you know about PLG. You're not going to get those economies of scale because you're just going to become a sales-led organization.
Yeah.
So really the walkaway here is, as you're having these conversations, the big thing I would encourage everyone to do is force the conversation back to like, well, what's best for the customer? Even taking a pause in a very technical conversation that we have. Sometimes we do like a whole funnel flow where we're looking at like what's going on at every point, what system, what's the user doing? We'll pause and say, okay, great, but what should they be doing? Or what do they want from us? What can we be doing better? And that's where you're going to get your conversion lifts, is if you match them where they need to be matched.
Now, one thing that I always think about when I think about PLG and I think about, how to build a great model for it is I tend not to look at other B2B companies. I tend to try to look at B2C companies because, over the lifespan of that portion of the business world, they're always thinking about an optimized customer experience because they don't have salespeople. For the most part, they don't have salespeople. So, how do you create an Amazon-like experience or a Netflix-like experience where the product becomes so intuitive, it doesn't require somebody to have a conversation with a salesperson or a customer success person? And a lot of that comes from things like automation. It comes from, maybe systems that we have currently or systems that we may want to be adding into our tech stack. But ultimately, if you're thinking about in my opinion, if you're thinking about how do I take my sort of lead-based hat of how I insert certain human beings into various stages of the funnel and wearing that into a PLG environment, you're probably not necessarily setting yourself up to be successful.
Yep. So my thought on that is we don't want humans doing what a product could do, right? So the Netflix example, et cetera, right? We wouldn't want anyone picking up the phone and trying to tell them that they could click on here to see more. And so how can we have our product be pulling that? And this is a good transition to my next slide, which is we still need sales, right? Well, if we look at any company that has a PLG motion, once they hit that $5 million threshold, they have a sales team. Right. And we know what all these are, right? Notion has a sales team, right? Twilio, Zendesk, Intercom, all the logos I showed have some version of a sales team. But it's what are they doing, right? We don't want them to do the things that the product should do. We don't want them calling and saying, hey, have you checked out this feature that we know is very sticky? Our product should be getting us to that point.
Yeah.
I want to have, and I'm going to show a couple examples of playbooks, but I want our salespeople to do things that our product couldn't. Like, for example, see that we've had multiple departments using the product in silos. Great. I want to go elevate that conversation and move you to an enterprise level plan. My product probably can't get a champion to go have that conversation with procurement and IT and blow it up.
Yeah.
And so I think it's making sure that our team is focused on those hard conversations. And I think the question we all have to ask is, what is the role of an SDR now? How is that changing? Should they actually have more of like a customer service hat where they're helping you, push the conversation along, where they're creating champions, where they're expanding, as opposed to trying to book a meeting for an AE because they're already qualified. We've got all their information. That, BANT criteria qualification conversation that we've been doing for years is kind of gone. And I don't know if we've caught up yet.
Yeah, I think the sort of the perfect situation here is that you would have an SDR who could call into an organization and talk to somebody in an elevated role, in a leadership role, and say, hey, were you aware that there's multiple deployments of our product within your organization, and actually you can save yourself quite a bit of money by doing an enterprise rollout. And there's some added benefits that are provided as a result of that. That's like the optimal environment or the optimal scenario for SDRs in an environment like PLG. I think the challenge there is there's a long lead up to getting to that point, especially when you think about companies that are just coming to market. Maybe they're seed round, pre-seed, Series A company. They haven't hit that critical mass yet where there's wide adoption of their product to the point where there could be multiple deployments of their product within an organization.
And I think for those companies that maybe are a little earlier on, or like you said, there's like a big ramp up to get to that aha moment. Maybe you need to do a couple integrations, or you need to hit this critical mass moment. In those cases, maybe the human-led interactions are actually in a more CS standpoint. And maybe the goal there is, how do we make that faster? How is our human capital made so that instead of your aha moment taking 3 weeks, it takes 1, or 3 months, it takes 1, whatever the complexity of your product is. But I think that's a very real thing. We don't all have products where you get users on Slack and you just have to set a bunch of messages. I think there's a lot more complexity there. The only other thing I wanted to kind of note on this is, you mentioned this a little bit, Matt, which is something I also believe in. You started off the chat being like, it might be a little like ABM, where we put all our eggs in that basket. And I think a lot of us learn like, okay, it's not for everything. It's not my only motion. I feel the same thing about PLG, is that It's layered on top of other motions. It's absolutely fine to also have a demand gen function. It's
Yes.
absolutely fine to also have event led. Now everything's led, right? Event led, community led, customer led. It's just multiple motions. And I think one of the mistakes, and I'm getting a little ahead, but this is what I do. One of the mistakes that we make a lot is we can't treat these like totally individual funnels, because our customers don't do that. Some of our customers will sign up for their free trial, and then they'll also come to a webinar, and then they'll submit a contact us form. And the idea that you've got an MQL funnel and then a PLG funnel, it's just not true. And I have seen customers who have built like two very different motions.
Yeah.
And the truth is, you can have it in the same company, some customers that will interact, like individual users that will interact one way and another. And we have to figure out how to treat that as one.
Yeah, I think that brings up a really interesting point, because one, it's just really challenging to have multiple funnels to try to manage and optimize and set goals around, and sort of assign staff members ownership around. But people that come through a PLG motion, they function very different, right? And what those folks can do to a traditional waterfall is really break all of those metrics. So it is very challenging to think about how to do a sort of a incorporation of all those different forms of go-to-market. Because the reality is, I think, you talked about this earlier, based upon the customers that you guys work with. For the most part, most organizations that have a PLG motion, which is a very bottoms up motion, also have a very top down motion, right? And we see, plenty of logos that you guys have worked with that are true enterprise grade software and sell into the enterprise and have a top down motion. And it's to me, it's marrying the idea of, can we sell value to an organization as a whole in a very traditional way, but then also can we give exposure to our product to the practitioners of that product in a way where they're going to now feel really comfortable about an enterprise-wide adoption. So when that decision maker at the top decides, hey, we're going to purchase Zendesk or we're going to purchase PagerDuty, there's already a solid sense of organizational buy-in.
Totally. There's advocates. That's the Twilio model times, right? It's like the developers love it, right? But at a large organization, it's still bought at the top. So managing those two. And this is something I really haven't seen, especially as you get larger, a company nail this, but it's very difficult to, and a lot of tools promise you this, but the idea of reporting on an entire customer life cycle in a really easy, consumable way is not, we don't have that technology today. I think we can create really amazing, Tableau reports and get somewhere, but the customer journey really does just come from every direction. It is spaghetti. And it's okay to simplify. It's okay to have an MQL or a PQL date stamp and an SQL date stamp and an upgrade and get a sense of how we're converting and how much time it takes. Generally, we also have to layer it with like, hey, look, this is a model, and every model breaks and every model has its downfall, and not focus too much on trying to get that. It's not precious. So get the minimum viable product that gets you the insights that you need, and know that your customer experience, it is complex.
So we did have a question come in, Jen, and I do like to sort of address them as they come in. I apologize. For a PLG-led org where sales wants to take over from free trial conversion, how can marketing insert itself more to drive all the way to revenue versus just more free trials? So I think the question here is, how does marketing insert itself into that process so it's not just, hey, I signed up for a free trial, here comes sales, right? Like how do we continue to create a great experience for them all the way up into the point where they're ready to convert into a paying customer?
I think my initial thing that I think there is, anytime you hear the word handoff, it should be like an immediate red flag of this is probably a bad customer experience. We're probably not doing it well. And I think it's humans have a silos. Like we're really bad at working horizontally. it's just, it's much easier to align with your boss and what you're doing than it is across the organization. And I think the reason why a lot of companies have marketing being like, great, you're just top of funnel at the point when a lead's created or at the point when sales own, you're no longer own it. And I think this idea of ownership and handoff, et cetera, is part of what creates a bad customer experience, because absolutely marketing should be involved all the way through. I think we all know that. You should be creating campaigns that shorten the sales cycle. You should be creating content that helps the salesperson close it. We should be figuring out how to look at all the features they're already using. They've already gotten through a free trial. Maybe they've even been sold and they're now a converted customer. How are we creating campaigns to get them to that next feature or to expand them in another way? So I think probably the person asking this question is having a cultural and an organizational issue where we have to go essentially convince that marketing is more than top of funnel.
Yeah.
And, find the areas where we may not be just generating leads or free trials. We may also be shortening sales cycles and increasing expansions. Marketing can have a huge influence on that.
And just so you know, person, you're not alone. This is very typical, very typical.
Yeah.
So I think that dovetails nicely into this slide, which is when should sales get involved?
Right. Yeah. And I flipped this a little bit, which is the concept of sales, I think is changing. And you've probably already heard me that I say a lot, when's the next human interaction? Because depending on the company, I don't care if it's an AE, an SDR, I don't care if the CS, or you look at this company and they're connected to somebody in the C-suite and the C-suite picks up the phone and has a conversation. For me, it's identifying when is the right moment for moving forward. If I just take it as very simple, I would say we're looking for the aha moment, and we're looking for a moment in which the customer likes your product, has adapted it, is starting to see like, I could use this. That's typically a good time. That definition, I'm going to show you a few examples, is going to change, and it is not just one. So the big takeaway is this should be changing and you should be testing it all the time.
Makes sense.
And in this, I'm just trying to be a little spicy. Is the MQL dead? And I'll go quickly because we started kind of teasing it, that there's not one, we don't have to go all the way to saying there's no more demand gen. We're not doing MQLs. We're only doing product. Like there is a world in which this both lives in the same place. And somebody who interacts with your product and adopts your product and has that aha moment may also interact with your marketing and may also, submit a contact us form and all that we talked about. So for me, PQLs are, in a sense, the same thing that MQLs are, because we want an ICP match. So like we got that the same. For an MQL, we were typically looking for has done interactions. We were looking for actions on our website because that's what we could track. And now we're just layering on top of it product. So for me, I think we're going to move even further into saying what is a like sales ready lead. And that could be all three. It could be somebody that has done usage on your website. Maybe they're even showing intent from a third party intent. Maybe they're doing things on your product, but also they are an ICP. I think a lot of times we miss that. Don't go after everyone that's signed up and uses your product because they may not be an actual fit. Yeah.
I think it's funny because this conversation, specifically this question, was posed a lot during the emergence of account-based marketing, right? Right. Is all right. Are we moving away from the marketing qualified lead and moving more closely towards a marketing qualified account? And I think the reality is as most companies grew and evolved and started deploying account-based marketing, they knew that they needed both, right? And I think the same is true here in a PLG motion. There will be leads that come through your product and experience your product on their own terms. Then there will still be leads that will come through your SDR and your sales organization who want to be led by a human being because maybe they don't feel comfortable, maybe they're not a technical buyer, even though your product may be for a technical buyer, right? To me, the two still need to live side by side. Oftentimes, when I explain it, I have a character flaw where I like to make everything into a Venn diagram, and I just think of a PQL as being the smaller circle inside the MQL circle. Yes, you just peered into my psychosis. So great.
I love that. Cool. And so on the next slide, we already talked about this a little bit, but I'll just hit the point one more time, which is there's not one funnel. Like, don't let your intro BS, the silos that I talked about, be the customer experience that you create. So when we were teasing a little bit about marketing handing things off, like, you just affected the customer experience. We're saying that they're no longer going to be nurtured by marketing after they're handed off to sales. That to me is internal infrastructure that's affecting our customer experience. So we were just going to see a lot of different strategies, and that's okay, right? Like, I think the best companies are testing out a lot of different strategies, like event-led and community-led, et cetera. And, the other thing that is you're going to have the urge to track every single activity and try to make sense of it. There's an 80-20 rule here. You'll go crazy if you're trying to identify every single way in which someone's interacted with you. Stay at a place of creating models that help you make decisions.
Yeah. Ooh, new question.
Yeah.
All right. This is from an anonymous attendee. I appreciate
Ooh.
your anonymity. Ooh, that's not a word I can say. I think there's an opportunity for the enablement team to bridge the gap and silos between marketing and sales, creating the alignment necessary to help support the customer experience. Do you see organizations leveraging enablement in this way? Help train sales folks on customer data and campaigns for them to get involved, also creating additional content, webinars, and more community type events for customers to attend that help move the customer down the funnel. What are our thoughts?
Ooh, you're speaking my language now and into my psyche. So the best enablement teams that I've worked with are not like under sales enablement, because when you have that, you're going to just perpetuate the same silo. The best enablement teams are getting involved with like basically all the go-to-market functions and all the revenue teams, and working on creating, again, the best customer experience, maximizing revenue. They're also thinking about that. And I think in those cases, you are seeing them be one of the tactics in which it helps break down silos, because they understand the full cycle. They understand that we're not a great enablement organization is not driven to simplify the sales process. They're not driven to create the best SDR or AE experience. They're driven to create the best customer experience. They know that that's done through enabling their go-to-market teams, but they're, the goal that they're reaching is still through a customer lens. And I actually think those teams are rare.
I think they're rare too, because this is the first time I've ever heard of it, but I think it's brilliant because what it helps to do is sort of perpetuate, number one, that we're a customer first organization. And number two, the way we talk about our customers and the way we talk about our product needs a level of consistency. And we talk about, as a marketer, we talk a lot about this. Like, we want to make sure that we have, integration of our campaigns and they're all, telling the same story. We struggle when we're trying to branch across multiple departments to have that same level of consistency. And oftentimes people are like, well, the product marketing team created the sales deck, therefore we're all aligned. Correct? Well, incorrect, right? If for anybody who's ever listened to a Zoom info call or sort of, or even not necessarily things that are interactions between business and customer or business and prospect, just even the way that they talk about things internally, creates a lot of deviation between what our motion needs to be, which is it needs to be about the customer first. And if we nail that, everything else good will happen down the waterfall here.
Agreed.
All right, cool. Thank you, anonymous attendee. Great question.
And then on this slide, it was a little bit of where you might be now and where to go, right? So some of the things that we might see in places, you spend a lot of money and you spend a lot of your time trying to figure out how to convert free users, right? You capture them and now, fingers crossed, they start paying. So how do you move from that to creating systems and processes and a culture to identify the right time for a human interaction to essentially blow that up, elevate it, make it faster? Or how do you go from having nurture campaigns, which typically this is how it starts. You implement a free trial flow, then you create a free trial campaign where when they sign up, they get an email. 3 days later, they get an email. It might be a little bit smart. It might look a little bit of your actions, but you basically have created something where you're sending an email every 3 days. How do you do that to creating emails that matter, that are really looking not only at the actions within their product, but who are they, what level company they are, what do they need next to get the most out of their product? And it does not feel like, okay, I just got put in a nurture and they do what Matt said, which is unsubscribe pretty immediately. And then how do you go from a sales-led organization that's probably focused on sales targets and sales volume and making sure that our SDR is fed, all the things we talked about, to a PLG focus that's really thinking about what's next for the customer. What's that experience that we want to create? And then I've been sprinkling this throughout, but like that whole section that we talked about is you're going to have multiple funnels. That's okay. Don't treat them as independent. Your buyer doesn't do that. So try to get into the mindset that we're creating a broader experience. And it is not about having a sales-led funnel and a self-serve funnel and a community funnel. They are going to have the same people in all three.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. Okay, so we've been saying PQL and MQL and all these things. So I want to just give a chance of what is the actual definition? How do we think about it? And so, PQLs do convert higher. That's what we're going after here, right? PQLs, you're getting into the double digits. Rare that MQLs are going to get into the double digits. So that's what, that's what we're working for here. So we do value at PQLs very, very highly. I also say PQL, but keep in mind that you're going to see a lot of content around PQAs. So looking at the lead and the account a little bit separately, but for this, you'll see the left-hand side's the same, right? We're looking for ICP. And this is, we're getting really good about it on MQL. We're not as good at a PQL. Our sales team gets really excited by active users and users that use your platform a lot. They're not all great, even when they're at a great company, right? So we do have to think about, who are our champions? Who do we want to involve? And then MQL is always about online behavior and PQL about product behavior. My thing is get real smart, use both of them, and make up another acronym. I've been saying, how are we creating sales ready leads? But whatever that might be, where we're saying, how are we getting to a place where our signals are showing that there's enough buying intent where we want to get involved? And those moments are precious and we don't want to do them too early.
Yes, that is the name of this game. And I first of all, really appreciate that there is an actual definition to these things that is super valuable for anybody who's sort of wrestling with this internally. This would be a number one. You'll all get a copy of this deck, but like this would be a fair screen to take a screenshot of because the truth of the matter is, you sort of look around the internet for thought leadership around this, and there's not a real common definition of this, right? And I think I think also people think about PQL and MQL so differently, as opposed to thinking about it as, it really starts from the same foundation, but then the behavior that you're monitoring and utilizing to determine when, a lead crosses over into being quote unquote qualified is different. It's tricky. It's hard to find a common definition. So I think this is really a good way to think about it. Obviously, the qualification will vary from organization to organization, but I think if you look at this and say, well, it starts with the same foundation, but then this is the differentiated behavior that creates a PQL versus an MQL, that matters. And then again, to sort of my Venn diagram brain, MQLs in a lot of cases, or in some cases, depending upon the organization, will become PQLs,
Sure.
right? So that sort of progression will happen.
Yeah. And I am seeing a lot of companies that have maybe a PQL funnel and also maybe a little bit of a complex funnel, that the role of the SDR is to get them into a free trial and help them, start experiencing the product. So again, back and forth. It's not just one flow. So in the next couple of slides, I'm going to dive a little bit into this. So when we talk about that demographic data, that ICP, again, this is the biggest issue that we're seeing, that there's that's not really tight and you're going to waste a lot of time. We're layering that on product usage. And then the other thing I would say is there's the engagement signals that we're talking about there. You could also layer that on intent tools. So if you go on to one more slide, I think my big thing is that there's a lot of different types of PQLs. There's a lot of identifying factors. And so the reason, Matt, why you're saying there's many definitions and it's really hard to get to one PQL definition, that's because, one more slide, I'm going through these quickly because they all build onto this. You don't get one. And, I think I don't really love the the framework that we've done a lot of times, which is to build a PQL or an MQL by a score. So give
Mm.
something 5 points to get somewhere,
Yeah.
because I think it's so dependent on the playbook that you're running. So if you're looking for an expansion, play, or there's multiple departments, I need an enterprise play, or maybe your customer's already there and you won't think there's an early renewal, or an expansion play, or if you've got director level signups that are not going to use the product, all of these are going to have a different PQL definition. And so the smartest teams I'm seeing have multiple. So a lot of and/or criteria that can be a bazillion different playbooks, and also that it's changing and that you're testing it out. Take a lot of you can learn a lot from growth marketers on this, where their whole ethos is we're going to be always testing something different, changing the color of the button, the way that you sign up, the notifications, everything, to see if we can increase the conversion by 0.5%. I think the best revenue operators or folks focused on PLG are going to be doing that with this definition, because again, we can learn from our MQL mistakes. You can't set it and forget it. The customer's always changing, your content's always changing, your product's always changing.
So interesting that you bring that up, specifically with the growth marketer mindset, because the way I think our brains have been trained over the course of the last decade on how to do, demand gen or demand capture or whatever the sort of phrases of the moment, is that we want to try to add more value to the customer's experience over and over again, right? Whether it's, hey, let me give you a little bit of third-party validation here. Maybe that comes in the form of an analyst report. Maybe it comes in the form of a case study. Maybe it's some information on a specific use case and how you use the product to execute that use case. I find in a PLG motion, and this is somebody who's not done a ton of PLG over the course of my career. So if you're like, hey, your mindset here is wrong, like I'm open to it. Is that it's about removing friction.
Sure.
Right? And I think like the challenging thing is, as we set up the infrastructure for PLG, is that we often approach it again with that lead-based mindset, which is let's add value along each step of the journey, as opposed to let's make it as simple as possible from somebody to go, oh, I think PagerDuty is an awesome product, to I'm now using PagerDuty, and whether it's in a free trial environment or whether it's in a free tiered environment. Like, we want to get that person into the product as quickly as possible. And I think what we have to do is we have to sort of reconcile that we're willing to lose a little bit of insights onto who that person is in order to get them into the product as quickly as possible. What are your thoughts on something like that, Jen?
Yeah, well, frictionless buying experience is definitely the goal. So I totally agree with you on that. I was at a SaaS Talk event last year, and I was at a session that talked about what you talked about, which and then I was at a session that said the opposite. I think this is one of those where they both can work, where I heard some companies have huge success by saying, we just captured an email at the top, let people use our product.
Yeah.
And then we had other ones where they were saying, no, we need specific values to get through. We're always asking our customer for data. I think you could streamline it as much as you can, right? There's tools out there that let you append data. There's ways to capture the data without just outright asking or making the buying experience. There's also a lot of people testing out asking for a credit card versus not, asking for $1 versus not. And what does it mean to get someone to at least put their credit card with $1 trial? Are they likely to convert more than if it's completely free? This is sort of that same mindset that I'm thinking about, which is you got to test all this stuff out. And it could be product specific, it could be experience specific, and sometimes it's not very intuitive. Actually, at Twilio, we had a big thing where we were like, we got to reduce the number of fields. There was a point where it didn't matter. It was like going, from 10 to 5 helped, but going from 5 to 4, we were losing out a data point and not actually converting that much less. So you're going to have to play with those things. But from an ethos perspective, lower the friction, get people in, show value quickly. And then the rest of it, I think it's testing, because I was hearing the same 2 sessions And one was saying, never ask for a credit card. And the other one was saying, charge everyone $1. I don't have any answer to that one.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
So you heard this, but have multiple definitions for all these things. It's very, very tempting to make it my PQL definition is 100 points. What you're going to do is you're also going to confuse your sales team. What does 100 points mean? So have multiple playbooks and have multiple definitions and change them all the time.
Yeah. Do not hammer them into a stone tablet and bring them down from the mountain and say, hey guys, this is what it's going to be from now until eternity.
Mm-hmm. And then the other thing, again, that I'm teasing is think about this as, your customers need a human-led moment. We've created an incredible product. They're really loving it. One of your prospects or current customers is going to signal that they need that moment. And so you could look at what actions they've taken. Who are they? How are you identifying champions? What are those signals that tell us like, okay, this is the person that's going to be our champion? Have they been part of specific activities? Do they have other things? Do they need new features? Do they need a different plan? These are the things that we have to arm our team with. And so how do you collect all this information? Because when we're talking about handing this precious user to our sales team, what we don't want them is picking up the phone and saying, what does your company do? And have you heard about this feature? And they're like, yeah, I use it every day. And so all these questions that we have to think, we have to get all these bullet points that I have here to our sales team. Nirvana would be somebody signs up for your product. They're using it. They're showing all these signals. We now automatically create an opportunity for our sales team with contacts already associated that tell us which one are champions. We have the key features that they've, played with. We might have some outside things like their funding or their specific industry or events that they've been to or the way that they've interacted with our C-level executives. And you gift that to your sales rep. You say, great, now you have to have a conversation. Here's your playbook for the kind of conversation. This is an expansion play. These are the kinds of questions to ask.
Yeah.
I don't know any company that has that exactly, but we're getting closer. We're getting a lot closer to not just identifying, but also crafting what that call is so that your precious customers that really love your product aren't annoyed that someone called them and asked them very basic questions.
Yeah. And I think oftentimes, our perception of what, as a marketer or as a product person, our perception of the way the sales team might interact with that prospect or that, customer, depends upon how you're defining a person who's using your product, is that they're going to come in and mess it up.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is they just might. But the reality is it's incumbent upon both the marketing department and the product team to provide them with all this information. And I think in a lot of these cases, some of the sales interactions in PLG motion can be bad. And it's not because it's the salesperson's fault. It's because they're not given enough information. They haven't had, kind of that first call script planned out for them. We think because we've had this lead-based motion or this account-based motion that sales reps know how to do a first discovery call and they know how to run a successful sales cycle, but this is different. And because product and marketing departments are approaching it from a different perspective, sales needs to approach it from a different perspective as well. And when you talk about, kind of early on, like that enablement person or that training person, they need to have a perspective, not just in the way, the product is viewed by the customer, the marketing that's being sent to them is viewed by the customer, but also the way that the sales process interacts with everything that they've had leading up to that experience as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I have a lot of empathy for, I am a seller, so I have a lot of empathy for sales. I think if you also think about our expectations, many times we are saying, hey, call this list. I'm going to track how fast you get to it. You got to call everybody within an hour. And, I can't go and then have a very educated conversation if I've got 3 minutes to research. And you're giving me just their LinkedIn, link. Exactly. And it's the same thing here is we're saying, go have a very thoughtful conversation. What their next step is for a customer that's already using your product. But we're going to give you a bunch of information in 6 different places and it's not intuitive and, go for it.
Yeah.
we're just not matching our expectations with the tools that we're giving our sellers.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's keep cruising. I know we've got a question in the queue. It is about technology. I kind of want to leave that for, I want to let you kind of wrap this up before we get to that. Okay.
Cool. This is our last slide. So it's a good point. So these are just things to think about when we're looking at the best PLG companies and people that are nailing it. They're testing and changing those definitions often. They think about PQLs and PQAs throughout the funnel. They do also think about interactions with marketing or dark funnel content. You got a podcast, you probably don't know anyone who's listening to it. That's still having an effect. We want to give sales, marketing, CS teams that what we were just talking about, the right data to take action. How do we get them closer to that nirvana space so that they know who their user is, what they're using, what they're doing in the product? It's a little bit of the question. We're investing in data architecture so that we can scale this. I didn't hammer in on technology because I think we tend to, in these kinds of webinars, really think about technology. So I want to take that out, but invest in that architecture. And then be customer obsessed. I've been saying that a lot, but try to put your customers' needs first, not your internal processes first.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. So this dovetails nicely into the question that we have, which comes from a non-anonymous question asker, Kevin O'Malley.
Oh.
Hello, Kevin. What is our perspective on emerging technology for supporting the PLG motion?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the most important bit of tech that you are going to need for PLG motion is what Jen mentioned. I think it was like the third or fourth bullet there, which is investing in your data infrastructure. This was the biggest challenge that I had when I was working for a company called Very Good Security, which had a PLG motion, was extracting insights out of that experience and using them in order to trigger different types of events, right? So the way the product was built at Very Good Security at that time, it was very hard to ascertain when or even if the person had their aha moment. It also was challenging to understand where they were in sort of their process of getting to an aha moment. So it became challenging to run any kind of nudge campaigns or nurture campaigns or anything like that, or even try to provide somebody a level of value like, hey, did you know you could use it for this type of use case? Because in a lot of cases, I was flying blind with the information that we had. The only thing that we knew was somebody had signed up, but not activated, or signed up and activated, and we didn't really understand the spaces that existed between those two. So having a system in place that can help you extract the data from the product and into whatever go-to-market system that you're using in order to trigger an event like that, I think that's foundational. That's step one.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I can maybe flip this question and say, what mistakes am I seeing?
Yes.
And I think that would be great. Taking a step back and designing the architecture that you're talking about. Here's the cleanup we've done before, where I'll just take a scenario of a product in Salesforce. We work mostly with Salesforce, but replace Salesforce with your CRM. And you start out really simply saying, okay, I want to send emails based on the last time they logged in. Okay, well, we'll create a login field on a lead and contact, and we'll populate that. Great. Well, there's a free use, they created 3 instances. So now I need a second one for each of their instance. Okay, great. And then at the account, I want to know what the last login was for any of their users. When's the last time any user? And you start to do this like piecemeal. You start to put like a bazillion fields on the lead and contact and account. And, and maybe that started with a marketing use case. And now sales starts to use that information and CS starts to use that information. And it's not actually in a consumable way. And eventually you will probably move to a custom object that has maybe an instance and a user, and you have usage. You'll probably create a usage object, but most of the time you piecemeal it for a while and it does start to work, but pulling that out and redoing the integration is very expensive. Yeah. So I would say it's not that much work to step back and think like, what is our infrastructure? How do we think about instances? How do we think about users? How do we think about usage? What are our key life cycle events? That's what we kind of called them with one client. Like, what are the key things that happen in products that we want to track? And then date stamps, not check boxes. date stamps all day so that we know when it happened and we don't have to look in multiple places. So I'd say data, like your data infrastructure is key. And then what technologies are coming up? Tons. This is an unpopular opinion. I haven't heard too many people talk about it, but I think we're all feeling it. It's my opinion that marketing automation is falling behind. That, you know, I don't think we've had major innovation in our Eloqua, Marketo's, Pardot's, you know, kind of space. And I think there's I actually really respect HubSpot's innovation, but I don't think it's in the marketing automation space. And I think that there is room for a new way of engaging with our customers, because there have been some product messaging and other applications that have come, but now we've got two systems and then we have outreach on top of it and everybody emailing in multiple ways. We are not managing our communications with our customers. We don't really have that in a smart way. So I think that's something that's coming up. And then there's a bunch of tools that are coming up around PLG specifically. So product information, getting that to reps in a way that's really consumable. There's a ton of new products coming up there. My only drawback there is we're adding another tool. So now our sales reps have to look for MQLs in Salesforce, and then they've got to look for product leads in another tool. And I'm seeing some pain around that, but these tools are popping up.
Yeah. I think, I think in general, it's if you have an ability to move data into a single system or into a single, source of truth, which is probably not Salesforce, even for Salesforce users.
Changing. I agree.
It's probably going to be Snowflake, just given the speed in which you can move data in and out, and your ability to sort of correlate all data sources directly into Snowflake. I think that's the direction that everything is headed right now.
Yeah. We just had a new customer and they didn't have a CRM. They were kind of ready, and it's actually really amazing how far they got with that one. And we went in and we called the project like the customer stack. And so we came in and we said, okay, great. What's our revenue customer stack? And when we drew it, we had data warehouse in the middle.
Yeah.
Every other time I've done that in the past, we put Salesforce in the middle. It's changing. Yeah. And then it's a lot of like reverse ETL and integrations to clean that data, push it into the systems that are needed. But I don't think and also data is very expensive in Salesforce. It's like, can't put all this like product data in there. Now we're really thinking about what do our users need inside of Salesforce. And then it used to be that we want everything in a Salesforce absorbed by other applications. And now we're going directly from data warehouse into Marketo through like a tool like Segment or something else, and pushing just what you need. Simplifying also, you've probably been it's impossible to pull a segment in Marketo if you've got 4,000 fields. Exactly. It's very confusing for our users. So we're simplifying that. And I do see ourselves thinking about like, here's all of our data and pushing that into the tools that need it.
Yeah. Well, we are at the top of the hour. So I appreciate everybody holding on for as long as they did. We had most people who logged in at the beginning stay all the way up to about 2.5 minutes ago. So thank you so much, Jen. Jen, if some of these folks want to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
On TikTok. On LinkedIn's fine. Jenny Gartwa. I'm on there a lot.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Big thank you to Jen. Oh, somebody's in the chat. Boo, 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 boo. Ooh, it's a thank you to you, Jen. Thank you. Great content. Thank you. And I agree with that person as well. So thank you all for attending. We will have another webinar coming up in 2 weeks. Everybody's favorite marketer on the planet, Maria Pergolino, is going to be live with me talking about update to your marketing mix, given all the changes that have happened to the world of marketing over the course of the last couple of years. So excited about that. Again, Jen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Perfect. Really great. So thank you, everybody. See you next time.
Bye.